Pete, I'm old school. Okay, when the Oilers, I grew up watching the greatest offensive dynasty in the history of the National Hockey League, the most electrifying, exciting team that's ever lived. But they also had toughness.
Bob Stauffer, first Bob episode of the regular season. Oilers Radio, Oilers Now, the best. What's up, Bob?
Oh, just, sometimes you got to play a little hurt. I have to get a little dental work done on Friday, but the swelling hasn't gone down. And I'm at the stage now where I'm so ugly, it doesn't matter how I appear anymore. So I just go with it. You know what I'm saying?
There he goes, right off the only thing we don't like about Bob is he comes in and he's like, we're like, we've got the GOAT. And he's like, well, yeah, who could love me? We're like, you're fucking Bob Stauffer.
Also, I mean, it probably helps make you feel better to look at Zach Hyman's face this morning.
Oh, man. Well, that's going to happen when you're the net front, right? You get, pucks deflecting and ricochet. Those are always scary. You always worry about that. I worry the most when I see a player kick their feet on the ice. That's when I have the greatest amount of concern, because usually that's a sign they get it in the eye or something. When a guy can skate himself off the ice, which is also part of what Zach Hyman is. It shows you, the toughness that he has. I mean, he's a classic overachiever, and he's tough as nails. And he, along with Matthias Ekholm, have been two of the players that, in fairness, Ken Holland brought in that really kind of added some support to the Oilers leadership core of McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, and Darnell Nurse, that really helped transform Edmonton from a good team to a pretty good team. And a pretty good team wins, around 50 games a year, and that's what Edmonton's done each of the last 3 seasons.
Well, had you told me to guess 30 minutes into the game last night, what is Evan Bouchard going to do next, I probably would have guessed kill one of his teammates, because things had gone so poorly for him. But you bring up Zach Hyman and you bring up Matthias Ekholm and the type of players that they are. This kind of feeds into the main thing we want to talk about. We've watched the Oilers now play 2 teams, Vegas and Florida, and I guess to a degree Minnesota, who figure to be standing between them and the Stanley Cup. Do you think this team, with what they've got, is positioned to beat those teams in a series?
I don't know. Like, Minnesota's been a bad matchup for Edmonton for the last couple of years. But saying that, I think if you looked at the analytics in Minnesota, I think Minnesota is really well managed, first of all, with Bill Guerin. In fact, all 3 of the teams that Edmonton's just played on this run are really well managed organizations. But I thought Minnesota's record was a little bit deceiving. I didn't think they were that good. And then they had some injuries, and they didn't have Eriksson Ek, and they didn't have Jonas Brodin, and they layer up against Connor McDavid and make him go, through first Eriksson Ek, then Brodin, and then they got, Connor's got to beat the goalies. So that was, Middleton got hurt first shift of the game, and it completely changed the complexion of that game. So Minnesota has been a tough out. I just don't know how good they are. Vegas is legitimately good. Like, Vegas was one of the first times the Oilers have played Vegas in the last couple seasons where the Golden Knights have been completely healthy, and they have strength down the spine. So they have 4 great centers. They have a big defense. You guys know Cassidy pretty well. He plays zone defense as well as anybody in this league. And they have the type of D that can play it. They confront pucks. It's difficult to penetrate the box on those guys and get inside into the high rent district. Edmonton went into Vegas probably about 2 weeks ago, played one of their best games of the year, outshot the Golden Knights 16-2. That game, the Oilers deserved to win. The game Saturday afternoon at Rogers Place, I thought the Oilers, frankly, were a little bit lucky. Vegas was coming at Edmonton in waves, and the Oilers were able to, kind of fend it off. And Stuart Skinner had, at that point, his 6th consecutive start where, he gave the goals saved above expectation were on the positive side of the ledger. Gave the Oilers, he was the better of the 2 goaltenders between him and Aiden Hill. Last night against Florida, that was an ugly game. Both teams, if I was, Maurice or Chris Knobloch, I wouldn't have been happy with how my team played. It was a beautiful game to watch because there was lots of goals and a little bit of scrappiness in the game as well. Florida didn't have Barkov. I think Edmonton squandered an opportunity against a pretty good team, and Stewart had a tough game. And then on the back end, Evan Bouchard had a maybe his most challenging night. He did get tweaked with a hit against Minnesota, and I don't think he's at 100%. I don't think he's completely comfortable right now. But those are three good teams. I frankly see Vegas and Florida at a little bit different level than Minnesota. I mean, you're talking about the last two Stanley Cup champions.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we've kind of put Minnesota in that lower category as well. You mentioned Saturday and last night, like the Oilers kind of got leaned on a little bit, and things can come apart for Edmonton. They got a little lucky on Saturday with Jeff Skinner bouncing back and getting back that goal that Stu gave away. Like, do you see that becoming a problem for that team down the road, and how would they fix it, or how would you try to fix it?
Pete, I'm old school, okay? Like, when the Oilers, I grew up watching the greatest offensive dynasty in the history of the National Hockey League, the most electrifying, exciting team that's ever lived. But they also had toughness. Like, they had tough teams. They were a top three tough team in the NHL as well. Like, in the first couple Stanley Cup, Dave Semenko in the early 1980s was a top three fighter in the league and maybe the best enforcer, because he would tune the rats once in a while too. Like there's some fighters that wouldn't necessarily go after sort of the smaller agitators, and if Semenko had to, he'd send a message. And then, they're the sort of the 86, 87, 88. I mean, they picked up McClelland for the first cup. He scored arguably the biggest goal in team history, and pound for pound, he might have been the toughest guy on the team. And then by 80, the second of the back-to-backs, Marty McSorley was there, and Marty was a very effective, player along McClellan. So I've always felt you needed that, and you do it differently today. You do it with a little bit of firmness and competitiveness. I think you raise a very valid point, Pete, and it's one that's got me like. I think they've got to add. They got to find a way to add a bigger right shot center. They have a guy on the farm, Noah Phillip. He's not a super aggressive player. He took a year away from hockey. He's got to play some games. But if I was the Oilers, I'd find a way to test drive him, possibly in February, just to see if he can handle it. Otherwise, I think they're going to have to make a trade. Now, Colson's given them a little bit of physicality.
But punched a hole in a guy's head.
Pardon me?
He punched a hole in a guy's head. Straight through Jeremy Lauzon's forehead.
Well, think of what happened last night. Like AJ Greer did a number on Colson in Colson's first ever NHL fight. And last night, AJ Greer hits Colson straight in the back from behind in Labortz. That could have been I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to. It's a loser's lament to whine about officiating. So some guys would have stayed down on the ice to try to milk that. And he got up and went right back at a guy who'd previously won, one of the few fights he's had in the NHL career against him. So I'm liking what Colson brings, but Pete, I tend to agree with you. I think they could use a little bit more size up front. I think the dynamic will change a little bit with their forward groups. And then on defense, they're adding something at some point. I don't know if it's going to be a right shot. It could be a left shot that plays the right side. It doesn't have to be a shutdown guy or a cycle stopper. It could be a guy that can move the puck, and maybe that's how you play, is you just have another transition guy that can get the puck up the ice. But they will be adding a defenseman. And then they have a wild card, and the wild card is Evander Kane. I had him on my show on Friday. He's not he has yet to start skating. If they get the Evander Kane from the 2022 playoffs, where he was a menace out there and, was engaging in psychological warfare on the ice, that's a really good player. And the reality is, by the Stanley Cup final last year against Florida, he just was not right and could not help Edmonton. He couldn't get there. But Evander Kane can be a force, and Evander Kane is prepared to do things that fewer and fewer players are willing to do these days. So he is a total wild card for me for Edmonton.
And the defense was terrible last night, but the thing that we've been talking about more and more recently is Darnell Nurse. And yeah, he got the basically teed up yesterday and didn't have his finest night, but he's been awesome of late and really most of the season. Is it just that he's healthy, and how much does his season change what type of defenseman they need to get now?
Well, that's a good point. I think Brett Kulak's played a factor in maybe what type of defenseman they need as well. It's funny with Darnell. He's plus 17 in the last 18 games. Some people think that's too base level of a stat. I do tend to agree with you, DJ. Like he battled. Like I know he was hurt during the playoffs last year. He was not running. Lots of guys get hurt. There's lots of players that play through things. He's obviously playing a little bit better. To me, he's figuring out a little bit that less is more. Like we watched Chris Pronger in his prime here. That guy could play the game in a rocking chair. It was only 1 year, but man, oh man, he could play half the game and still provide an intimidating presence occasionally with when he decided to assert himself in the game. But Darnell, this is about as best that we've seen Darnell play in the last 2 or 3 years.
How many guys would you put above Leon Draisaitl in the Hart race at this point in time?
I think Kaprizov is there for sure. Like he has to be. Minnesota's had a good year. I'm going to what do you guys think?
We were like, I think and I'm biased, I have Kaprizov ahead of Leon. Yeah. But if somebody were to say, oh, I go Draisaitl, I go the center over the winger, and I go the center over who earmuffs Pete is playing with Vasily Podkolzin on the second line.
I mean, Kasperi Kapanen,
yeah.
like waiver wire pickup. That's the guy you should be targeting there.
Like, Pete's always been big on people complain that, hey, you don't give Draisaitl line mates, but he's just this never-ending proof that do you really need to? So I am endlessly impressed with Draisaitl's season thus far. But I would still have Kaprizov ahead of him, but like he is right there. And last night on that first time in goal, looking a little bit Selke-ish as well.
Yeah, it's funny. They loaded up McDavid, Draisaitl, and Hyman, in the third. Of course, Hyman was coming off the blocked slap shot off his face and had the bubble on it. And I think for some players, I wonder whether or not if Hyman didn't have that bubble on, if he finishes one of the attempts that he had in the third period. Like it's a little bit of an adjustment for some guys. It's funny with Leon. He likes playing with Podkolzin because Podkolzin's good on puck retrievals and supports the play defensively. He and then Kapanen's got a little. Kapanen can skate. He's got some skill. But you raise a very valid point. Like he is not playing with the Oilers' best offensive players, 5-5, and then they loaded up McDavid, Draisaitl, and Hyman. Those guys got dashed for -3 in the third period. And here's where I say to you, 2 of 3 goals. Okay, you know what I mean? Like I hate being the guy looking back to the goals saved above expectation. 6 straight games, Stuart Skinner was above it, and then last night I think, depending upon which model you use, well, it's at minimum -3 in the game. So there, especially the goal that Reinhart scored on the 1-on-4. Now it's a great shot, and part of that happens because of the way goalies play today. But the bottom line is I can't go in, and it does occasionally go in. And when your guy puts it in, like a McDavid or Leon, which they've done before, where they drill it in off the goalie's ear, it's a great play. But it's frustrating when it happens against you. I'll give you another stat on Leon. Connor missed 3 games due to a lower body injury. The ankle injury against Columbus. The Oilers went 2-1 in those 3 games. The one game they lost was New Jersey on the second of a back-to-back, and they outshot New Jersey 31-16. So Draisaitl had 3 goals and 6 points, went +5 in those 3 games without Connor. So he raised. I don't think I need to sell, especially you guys who, of anybody outside the market of Edmonton that seem to have a fundamental understanding of all things Edmonton Oilers. It's the What Chaos podcast, but. Those guys are, Leon's a pretty special player. I think everybody in the league knows that. And
we're allowed to say it. I every time, because it's now twice that Stu has given up a devastating goal to Sam Reinhart. You see the Stu Skinner jersey behind me. I paid full retail. I love that man. But the goaltending last night, we're allowed to say, was terrible on both sides. Stu was good for 30 minutes, I would say. And then just when it rains, it pours. But I didn't get him ready for the show, but I wanted to show the stills of Reinhardt's angle, of Leon's angle, and of Connor Brown's angle. Both of those goalies were absolute assholes last night. I love them. Respect to those men, but they were assholes last night, and we're allowed to say it. I'll tell you who's not an asshole. It's you, Bob Stauffer. We're going to see you in a couple of weeks when you're in Boston.
Bring out the credit card, fellas, because I'm one cheap guy.
Oh,
let's go.
North End.
Yes.
North End, bring Jack, bring Gene, Louis, the whole gang.
So excited.
Oh,
that's real.
What's that?
You didn't even talk about the Bruins. What's going on with this team? I did some research. They were plus 128 a couple of years ago. Minus, what are they right now? They're minus 19.
I'll tell you what they are right now. They're hot right now. They came off a dominating win against the Vancouver Canucks on Saturday night.
I heard you on the broadcast last night saying, and they got Boston coming up, still trying to kind of figure out what Boston is. And I'm yelling at the radio. I'm saying, we were texting yesterday, Bob. I fucking told you what the Bruins are. And I told you guys are going to kill them.
It's going to be bad. It's going to be real bad.
Well, the Oilers have been, I think, plus, what are we here? Let's see, plus 65, plus 57 the last 2 years, or plus 12 this year. They'll probably finish about plus 35 or 40 at worst, realistically. I mean, the schedule actually eases up in the final 50 games. I've watched Boston 3 or 4 times. I don't know what they are when I see them, but
Same.
They've had. Is that fair? Is that fair, you guys?
Same. I've watched every game. I don't know what they are. They're assholes.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, though. When you were talking about, they need a right shot center with a little bit of size or whatever, I immediately Googled Charlie Coyle contract, because what if Boston ends up selling? That could be a guy that would be perfect for this team. It definitely wouldn't help the speed stuff with the Oilers, but I'm like, man, maybe you do a little scouting on, what is it, Thursday when they play? Yeah, maybe you do a little scouting.
By the way, how's Kastelik played?
Oh, he rocks. He's like one of their guys that does bring a little bit of everything. I've been pretty impressed by him. He was one of their only good forwards at the beginning of the season when everybody sucked.
Okay, figure out what I'm saying here. You asked me whether or not they need a little bit more size and bite, and I said, well, they could use a fourth line right shot center that's got a little bit of size and bite. I don't know about you, but does that Kastelik fit the bill?
I think that's Pete's second Oilers jersey. He still hasn't gotten his Jeff Skinner, but that's on the way. Bob, we appreciate you always. We can't wait to see you.
Awesome.
We all silly like the mayor.